What's going on, guys? MMA Outlaw back here with another video, and today we are going to be fixing the UFC's light heavyweight division. If you watched my last video fixing the UFC's heavyweight division, you already know Alex Poatan Pereira is making the move to heavyweight to fight Cyril Gane in an interim UFC heavyweight championship bout. And that means Tom Aspinall is going to be sitting out on the sidelines with his eye surgeries, fighting the winner of that fight. But where does that leave the UFC's light heavyweight division with Alex Pereira vacating his title and moving up to heavyweight? What should we do with that UFC vacant title? Let me tell you. We should make Yuri Prochazka versus Carlos Ulberg for the UFC vacant light heavyweight title. You already know Carlos Ulberg has been on an absolute tear recently, beating up guys like Alonzo Menifield in 13 seconds, taking out Jan Blachowicz by unanimous decision. Yuri Prochazka himself is an absolute killer. Went to war with Rountree. Rountree just could not take it anymore in the third round. Yuri Prochazka has been in big moments, winning the UFC vacant light heavyweight championship versus Glover Teixeira, submitting him in the fifth round. The only guy who has been able to take out Yuri Prochazka is Alex Poatan Pereira. Does Carlos Ulberg, the city kickboxing product, have the ability to beat Yuri Prochazka? We are going to find out in a vacant light heavyweight title fight. Israel Adesanya's protege, Carlos Ulberg, at 205 versus the wild man, Yuri Prochazka. So, who is the winner of that fight going to fight, though? I know you guys are asking that question. And so, Khamzat Chimaev will take on the winner of that fight. Khamzat Chimaev has been on an absolute tear at 185, was at 170 before. You heard him talk about getting 3 belts earlier in his career. I believe he is going to maintain the 185 belt. You know, there's no one really for him to fight at 185 right now. He just smashed DDP. DDP beat Sean Strickland. If Fluffy had beaten Strickland, then maybe Fluffy could take on Khamzat. But it's really a weird situation because is Imavov the number one contender? Well, Strickland's coming off a win and Strickland beat Imavov. And so what I think makes sense is maybe Strickland and Imavov fight for an interim title and then they unify with Khamzat later. And Khamzat Chimaev moves up to 205 to try and claim double champ status. I think that is what we see from the Wolf, Khamzat Chimaev. And tell me you don't want to see a Khamzat Chimaev versus Yuri Prochazka fight. Those styles would be absolutely wild. Khamzat versus Carlos Ulberg, a technician on the outside. Will Khamzat be able to get the takedown on a huge 205er? That's yet to be seen, and I think that's a question that I would love to have answered. And honestly, we all think Khamzat would win those fights, and it would just be exciting to see. And so, beyond that, what do we do with the rest of this light heavyweight division? A boring division at it. We have to make the matchup. I put this little cloud bubble here. Why is Azamat Murzakanov, number 6 in the light heavyweight division, coming off of a big KO against Alexander Rakic? Why is he in a fight against Paulo Costa? Paulo Costa, an unranked 185er in 2026. This is not the Paulo Costa from 2020, from the COVID days. Paulo Costa in 2026, that does nothing for Murzakonov's career. Let's get Azamat in a number 1 contenders fight with Magomed Ankalaev. And those individuals, the winner of this fight would be next in line after Khamzat. And so we'll have these guys sit out for a little. You know, Magomed Ankalaev is fasting right now with Ramadan, typically does not want to fight during Ramadan. Get him a full training camp after. Maybe we can see this fight sometime in the late summer. And then one of these guys could be fighting for a belt in 2027. I just do not understand why Azamat Murzakanov, a surgical fighter, just wonderful from the outside. We saw him freaking flatline Rakic with a beautiful, I don't know if it was a left or right hand, but it was wonderful as Rakic was coming in, just caught him and slept him. And Magomed Ankalaev is coming off of one of the only times we've really seen him bested in his career against Alex Pereira. And with Alex Pereira making the move up to heavyweight, I don't really see Magomed Ankalaev having a claim to this belt with the run Yuri's been on, with the run Carlos Ulberg's been on, with Khamzat looking to come up, I think Magomed Ankalaev belongs in a #1 contender fight. And the only rightful foe for Magomed Ankalaev would be Azamat Murzakanov. And so, if we take back a look at the light heavyweight division, we've matched up #1 Magomed Ankalaev. We've matched up #2 Yuri Prohaska. We've matched up #3 Carlos Ulberg. We've matched up #6 Azamat Murzakanov. But what do we do next? What do we do next? What we do is a Volkan Oezdemir versus Jan Blachowicz matchup. When I first was thinking about making this bout, I was like, surely these guys have fought before, right? Volkan Oezdemir is a UFC vet, has been in the UFC for at least 10 to 15 fights. Jan Blachowicz, the same, former UFC light heavyweight championship winner. Put some respect on my boy Jan Blachowicz's name. Beat Israel Adesanya. Lost his belt to Glover Teixeira for Glover to start his reign. And Volkan No Time Oezdemir has been in the UFC for a while, just collecting names, putting people in body bags. A KO artist himself, has had many, many, many great bouts in the UFC. Many incredible flatline KOs. I remember when he beat Nikita Krylov. That was a huge win for Volkan Oezdemir. Absolutely slept him. It was a great fight as well. And I really think this takes two older UFC vets and finds out where they are in their career. Jan Blachowicz is coming off of a draw, I believe, against Bogdan Guskov. And Volkan Oezdemir has had some ups and downs in his career. Both these fighters are on the older side. So let's match up two older fighters who have been on somewhat of a downward trend in their career. And let's see, where do they stand? Who is the better one of the two? And then we can propel one of the two upward, potentially against a top-level young guy. And so I think both these guys are probably 2, maybe 3 wins away from the belt. But having this fight happen really allows us to see who still has it, and who do we want to match up against the next young up-and-comer. And so where does that leave us next? That leaves us with KIhalil Rountree versus Bogdan Guskov. I really do believe Guskov deserves a step up in competition, coming off of a draw against Jan Blachowicz. Looked really good in that fight. He's had some big knockouts in the UFC, wins over Billy Alakana and others. KIhalil Rountree, just known for being in absolute wars. But KIhalil Rountree being ranked #4 in the world, man, he might be a little overrated. He might be a little overrated. Do I dare say it about KIhalil Rountree? KIhalil Rountree lost to Dustin Jacoby. May I remind you? May I remind you that KIhalil Rountree lost to Dustin Jacoby. A great fighter at that, but Dustin Jacoby. May I remind you that Yuri Prohaska was getting beaten up by KIhalil Rountree and then proceeded to walk through KIhalil with reckless abandon. I know not many people can do it like Yuri can, but man, KIhalil looked like he faded big in that fight. We've seen KIhalil lose to Alex Pereira. We've seen KIhalil lose multiple times in his career, and I think it's time that he has to face an opponent that's, on the up and up. And Bogdan Guskov, while he's coming off of a draw, has had a really strong start to his UFC career, hasn't even been in the UFC all that long, ranked #9. And so I really believe that this allows him to propel himself up in his career and also gives KIhalil the opportunity to have a big bounce back win. And so I think this is a very entertaining fight for the fans. We're going to see an absolute scrap, an absolute war in this fight. Every time KIhalil Rountree fights, it's going to be a war. And so I think this one is good for the fans, and it's good for both these guys and where they're at in their career. And so where that leaves us with the UFC light heavyweight division, let me just get my face right out of the rankings, even though I should be ranked up there. I'm just kidding, obviously. But in the UFC light heavyweight division, Alex Pereira has moved up. Magomed Ankalaev, we have him taking on Azamat Murzakanov. Yuri Prohaska, we have him fighting for the vacant belt against Carlos Ulberg. KIhalil Rountree is taking on #9, Bogdan Guskov. We have #5, Jan Blachowicz, taking on #8, Volkan Oezdemir. And so where does that leave us? With a few fights left to make in these UFC light heavyweight rankings, next we are going to have Jamahal Hill take on Nikita Krylov. Nikita Krylov coming off of a win, but after that win I believe it was a decision victory, but it wasn't over anyone too impressive. But I know he was coming off before a loss to Volkan Oezdemir. We've seen Nikita Krylov. He got slept by Dominic Reyes as well. That was huge for me. Big Dominic Reyes fan over here. And one of the reasons you won't see Dominic Reyes in this breakdown is because Dominic Reyes is already scheduled against the Worm, Johnny Walker, and we love that matchup. That's going to be an absolute scrap, an absolute war. But back to this one, Nikita Krylov, Jamahal Hill. This one is going to be a good one. You know, Nikita Krylov comes forward with reckless abandon. That's how he got clipped by Dominic Reyes, put on his butt, absolutely flatline. And, you know, Jamahal Hill has a little bit of that similar style. Jamahal Sweet Dreams Hill coming off of a few rough losses in his career, losing the belt to Alex Pereira, and that really started a downward spiral. And I don't know if Jamahal Hill is all there mentally, to be honest, quite still. The Michigan product, has the nickname Sweet Dreams for a reason. Coming off of the Contender series, went on a tear with a bunch of knockouts. Only loss coming up was to Paul Craig. Got caught in one of Paul Craig's signature triangle arm bars. But then Jamahal Hill went on a tear, knocking people out, winning the was it a vacant title? I believe it was a vacant title against Glover Teixeira for a belt. We forget Jamahal Hill was a former holder of the UFC light heavyweight championship, which is honestly kind of embarrassing. But Jamahal Hill, nonetheless, at this point in his career, coming off 3 or 4 losses in a row, or I believe it's 3 losses in a row here, fighting Nikita Krylov, who's coming off a win but has had some up and down. What this does is this gives Jamahal Hill the opportunity to get right in his career. You know, 3 losses in a row. We want to see Sweet Dreams take a win. And what this also allows Nikita Krylov to do is allows him to take a big step back up in competition. Honestly, we don't have a lot of contenders at light heavyweight. I was thinking about giving Jamahal Hill someone like Umar Sy or someone coming up. But honestly, they're just a little too far away from this fight. Just a little too far away from this fight, in my opinion. I was going to give him Zhang MingYang, but Zhang MingYang's coming off of a loss. And honestly, I think this gives Jamahal Hill a good opportunity to get right. And I think the UFC is better when Jamahal Hill is winning. I think the UFC light heavyweight division, despite all the haters that Jamahal has, is better when Jamahal Hill is a part of it. And so I think Jamahal Hill getting Nikita Krylov would be a blessing for him. And I think Nikita would gladly take this fight with a big step up in the rankings. And so I think that's the fight to make. And next, moving on, we got our boy, Paulo Boricimo, Mr. Secret Juice himself. You know, we had Paulo Costa, Mr. Unranked, taking on Azamat Murzakanov. Why did the UFC make that matchup? No. We're going to get this right. We're going to get Alexander Rakic coming off of a bunch of losses in a row. Just got slept by Murzakanov, did Rakic. And Rakic before lost to Yuri Prohaska after looking very good. He tore up his knee in a fight previously as well. I believe Rakic is on a 4-fight skid after absolutely skyrocketing to the top of the UFC light heavyweight division. So Rakic has been on a slide. Rakic has a pretty big name. Paulo Costa is a guy that Rakic can beat. And I believe that Paulo Costa can also sleep Rakic. We've seen Rakic go night-night by a big counter. Sometimes he rushes in. And I think Paulo Costa can be the aggressor, sometimes sit back and hit him with big shots. And I just think that, honestly, this is a good fight for where both of them are at in their career. We cannot be doing Paulo Costa any favors anymore. Why are we giving him to Azamat Murzakanov? That makes no sense to me. Get him in a real fight against Alexander Rakic, have him build himself back up the rankings. And if he wants to, Azamat Murzakonov's ranked 6, and we're going to give an unranked Paulo Costa a 6, number 6 in the world. That just doesn't sit right with me. I think this number 11 versus, number 11 Alexander Rakic coming off of four losses in a row. Very winnable fight for Paulo. Lets him get on the right track. And same thing with Rakic. 4 fight losses in a row. Paulo Costa is a very winnable matchup for him. And so I think this is a great point for both of them in their careers. And I also just know this fight would be a scrap. This would be a great fight for the UFC. This would be a fight of the night type of fight. These guys always go after it. Alexander Rakic, big leg kicks. Paulo Costa always comes forward looking to finish guys. And so that's a great fight for the UFC light heavyweight division. And so moving on, we got unranked Jimmy Crute taking on Zhang MingYang. And this will be the last fight that we make for the UFC light heavyweight division. I was thinking, Zhang MingYang coming off of a KO loss to Johnny Walker. losing to Johnny Walker in the Big 2-5. That cannot happen anymore. So we got him taking on the submission specialist, Jimmy Crute. Jimmy Crute came out of retirement, has 2 big wins in a row. Jimmy Crute, we know him from before, is an absolute BJJ submission specialist. He went on an absolute tear in the UFC to start his career. Took 3 or 4, I believe it was 4 losses in a row. Retired, got his mind right, and came back, is coming off of 2 big wins. And I think this is a great spot for Jimmy Crute to potentially get back in the rankings against a less experienced guy, against Zhang MingYang. We've never seen Zhang MingYang really be challenged on the ground. And so if Jimmy Crute could get Zhang MingYang on the ground, we could see a submission here from Jimmy. And what this allows Zhang MingYang to do, we know Jimmy Crute has had a susceptible chin in the past. MingYang could easily KO Jimmy Crute here early in round 1. And so this is a get-right spot potentially for MingYang, coming off of a big loss to Johnny Walker. And this is also a really good opportunity for Jimmy Crute to continue advancing in his career, continue making this comeback a high-quality one. And so I think this is a fight that puts both of these guys in a very good spot in their career. And we also know the UFC is looking for entertaining fights, and this one would just be a banger. And so if we look back at the UFC light heavyweight division, where does that leave us? That leaves us Alex Pereira going to heavyweight to take on the winner, or take on Cyril. Alex Pereira taking on Cyril Gane, the winner taking on Tom Aspinall. I apologize. Magomed Ankalaev, he will be taking on our guy, Azamat Murzakanov. Yuri Prohaska versus Carlos Ulberg for the UFC Vacant title. We got KIhalil Rountree matched up against number 9, Bogdan Guskov. We got number 5, Jan Blachowicz matched up against number 8, Volkan Oezdemir. Murzakanov, we already spoke about being matched up against Ankalaev. Jamahal taking a big step down against number 13, Nikita Krylov. Number 8, Volkan Oezdemir getting an awesome opportunity to fight number 5, Jan Blachowicz. Dominic Reyes, we already have him fighting Johnny Walker. We know that's going to be an absolute scrap. We're very thankful that the UFC made that one. Dana White, the matchmakers, Hunter Campbell, did a great job with that one. Alexander Rakic, we got him taking a big step down, taking on unranked competition in Paulo Costa. Johnny Walker, we spoke about that Dominic Reyes fight. Nikita Krylov getting a big jump up against Jamahal Hill. Dustin Jacoby, we're going to have Dustin Jacoby come up against an up-and-comer, potentially an Umar Sy and one of those guys. And then Zhang MingYang getting a big opportunity to take on Jimmy Crute, a get-right KO spot for him, and a big spot for a submission victory for Jimmy Crute. And so, UFC, if you're listening to me, if you make these matchups, if you make these moves in the UFC, if you have that interim or that vacant UFC light heavyweight title, if you have Khamzat fight the winner, it will be a blessing in this universe. We will see great fights in the UFC light heavyweight division if the UFC can just listen to me, Outlaw MMA. Get me in the matchmaking room, Dana White, Hunter Campbell, I'm ready. Thank you for watching this video, everyone. That is how we fix the UFC light heavyweight division. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll be back. The next video, I believe, will be a predictions video for the UFC Fight Night this weekend with our best bets and everything. So stay tuned, get ready for that, and thanks for watching.